So I don't know where I got this idea that architects makes a lot of money. Man, was I a little disappointed when I graduated. But in the past 3 years, my side hustle alone have generated over 6 figures while working as an architecture designer. This might seem like pennies to my tech and finance friends, but that $3,000 to $4,000 extra every month had a pretty big impact on my life, especially as a young designer. Is 30 still young? So suddenly I could buy all the computer gadgets guilt-free. So today I want to share my side hustle journey about how I grew my first side hustle to 4 in a couple of years out of school. And hopefully I can inspire you to do the same. So here I'm in Silicon Valley, not exactly in tech, even though there's tech in architecture, but I'm kind of surrounded by friends who have this entrepreneurial dream to build their own business or a startup. So I was inspired to look outside of my industry and see what cool things that I could do outside my day job. Through some trial and error, I feel like I found some success turning my skills and hobby into a source of income while working less and not selling out by leaving architecture for more lucrative tech industry. This video is broken into 3 parts: how I got started, why you should consider starting a side hustle, and what kind of side hustle can you get into as a young designer. Let's go back to the very beginning to my very first side hustle, which actually wasn't intentional and planned at the start. After I graduated architecture school from Cornell, I decided to start my career in California, even though I spent my entire life on the East Coast. So strangely enough, the company where I used to intern in San Francisco reached out to me because they had a job that needed some help. As an intern there from before, I feel like I made a pretty good impression with my skills at rendering and visualization. And at the same time, I still had a full-time job. So I was technically moonlighting in my evenings and weekends when I had time, which was all the time because I didn't have that many friends. Still not sure if this kind of moonlighting was allowed. Clearly didn't read my employee manual, but anyways, one job led to another. Fast forward to year end, what really surprised me was how much money I made while moonlighting. Initially, I charged a pretty nominal fee because I honestly didn't know how much money to charge. You know, architecture school doesn't really teach you this kind of stuff, so I charged what I estimated would be my hourly wage as a regular designer in a company, which was totally a mistake because I didn't budget for tax, equipment, overhead, profit. Eventually, I found a more reasonable rate, and I was pleasantly surprised that at the end of the year, I was making almost as much as my day job, but only working fraction of the time. In the meantime, at my corporate job, I was working 5 days a week with very little time to actually be creative. I was too naive when I graduated and thought I was going to be like the star of the show, and instead I was working on these large student housing projects in Revit. Let's just say it didn't really squeeze my creative juice. I started to wonder what would happen if I put more hours into my side job. Would it be a more fulfilling path and with fewer hours and more pay? It sounded like a pretty good idea at the time. Around the same time, I was freelancing for a residential firm on some renderings, and they asked whether I would be interested in working for them. In my negotiation with the principal, I asked for flexibility to do my side hustle, and she was completely cool with it as long as I fulfill my daytime duties. We agreed that I would have a 32-hour, 4-day work week, and I have the whole Friday and over the weekend to do everything else for what I wanted to do. So this was the beginning of my first side hustle, and eventually the 3D rendering work dried up because I was competing with more international vendors that were willing to do the work below minimum wage. However, I realized I had other skill sets that I could potentially test out the water with. For as long as I remember, freehand drawing has always been a strength of mine. Even in childhood, I enjoyed drawing, especially with pen and ink, and I had spent hours upon hours honing the skill without realizing that one day this would become a source of income. Now I have a small list of clientele that includes architects, interior designers, and developers in this pursuit. Because hand drawing is so specialized and unique, this is a niche that not many people can compete in. This also meant that I can charge reasonably and have very little competition. My hand sketches have also proven to be quite a success through my online Etsy store that I started 3 years ago as a hobby project and wanted to see if people would actually pay to buy my sketches. I started to illustrate cityscapes, iconic architecture, and national parks of places that I've been to at first, which I sold as prints. I've slowly grew my store with over 500 different products with a projected revenue of about like 30,000 a year right now. Still in the architecture vein, my latest side hustle is photography. As a photography enthusiast and owner of many DSLRs from before, architecture photography is something that I came across recently and starting to gain some traction. With architecture photography, I didn't realize there are actually a lot of overlaps and transferable skills with my first passion, which was visualization and post-production in Photoshop. Why you should start a side hustle? It's totally to get rich, right? No. Besides being able to share my skills and pursue my passion, a top reason for me was to diversify my income. I think many of us were told to get a good education and a steady job. This is especially true for me growing up with Chinese parents. The dream is to work your entire life for good companies so you can earn a good income and save for retirement. We've been told that this is what we should aim for. But what if you get laid off? You could lose your entire source of income. Relying on this traditional route is a huge risk in my opinion, but you can reduce this risk by having multiple sources of income, including active and passive ones. With my client illustration and photography, these I consider as active incomes because I'm essentially trading my time for money, but it's not very scalable because there are only so many hours in a day and there's just one of me. At least with this path, I can trade my time at a higher rate than I would as an employee. Building a passive income stream is not really passive at first, but you can get to a point where you can literally make money while you sleep. For me, my online Etsy store is a passive income. Initially, it took a lot of time and effort to create the artwork, but a couple of years later, after I've hired the right assistants, the business is practically running itself, though I do spend about like 15 minutes a week looking through some data and inventory. Having more of these passive income allows you to have a choice to work less so you can pursue your creative interests and hobbies. Just think about all the other things you can do with this white space. For example, this free time allows you to grow and learn new skills. For me, those new skills include photography, producing for YouTube, and hatching a plan for world domination. I really think if I didn't have the extra 8 hours of white space in a week to just around and try new things out, I wouldn't have come up with my other side hustles. Once you have some passive and active source of income from your side hustle, you can think about early retirement or a version of retirement that doesn't force you to retire at 65. You can think about what a semi-retirement lifestyle might look like. Perhaps it's working 3 days a week with 2 extra days off to be creative in other ways or just to spend with family. There's actually a whole community of these kind of people and they call it lifestyle business. Lastly, this is also training wheels to run a business one day for yourself. You're learning to do tax, invoice, bookkeeping, and maybe file for an LLC. This allows you to decide if you're cut out to run a business. If you feel like stabbing yourself over these minutiae, then maybe starting a business one day isn't gonna be very fun and gonna make you very happy, at least not in the beginning. Side hustle for architects and interior designers. When you're looking into side hustles, you should start with your skill set. I think the most important thing is to think about what skills you have and how you could add value to someone else. The following side hustle ideas are things that I've considered based on my skill sets and are fairly accessible if you have a similar background. So number 1 is website design. Architects especially have an eye for this type of thing, and you might have already done one for your own portfolio. In the residential industry, I've noticed that many contractors, especially smaller ones, don't have a very appealing website. As visual perception is so important in our industry, you can definitely ask those who might be lacking this creative touch and offer your help to improve their website or even build them a new one. I've personally been asked to do this more than once, so I know there's a market for this. Squarespace, Wix, Webflow are all great places to look into. They already have beautiful pre-made templates that you can customize. I built mine using Webflow. Number 2 is photography. Many architects and designers already have a good eye for photography and composition as well. For me, I knew the fundamentals of using a DSLR, but I took a few more classes online in this niche. Now I freelance as an architectural photographer. Architects, interior designers are probably the easiest clients to get your foot into the door because you already know some of them and your background as a designer gives you that insider eye. And nowadays it's much more accessible because the equipment doesn't have to be very expensive. Most of my equipments were bought secondhand and many in superb condition. I shoot with a Canon 6D, which is about 8 years old, and I bought it for like less than $500. Consider doing a free or discounted shoots to build your portfolio first, or to build a relationship with a designer that you want to work with. Another idea is drafting and 3D modeling for other architects and interior designers. You can also provide technical support with Adobe or Bluebeam for those who are struggling or don't have the time to learn the programs. So chat up some solo practitioners around you and try to understand if there is a void that you can help to fill in. Oftentimes they might be looking for a part-time help instead of hiring someone full-time. Number 4 is rendering, and it's where I started, and it's still a good side hustle. Even though this is kind of expected skill sets nowadays, but there's still a demand for them, especially if you are above average. Many smaller practitioners lack the resource or the manpower or the womanpower to do this in-house, which means they're looking for competent individuals who are reliable and can step in on a consistent base. This is definitely me when I started. Number 5 is any sort of artwork is potentially a huge market. This could be drawing, calligraphy, watercolor, graphic art, and etc. Think about the things that you can do once and make copies of. So this is much more scalable than selling original art. For me, creating the initial artwork took some time, a lot of time actually, but selling as a print is so worth it if you can sell it time after time. If something is a hot seller, you can even print it on a physical product like a canvas or a mug and use dropshipping platforms like Printify to fulfill your orders so you don't have to hold any physical inventory at home. I strongly recommend looking into Etsy, Redbubble, and Printify as a start. Number 6 is selling your time on Upwork or Fiverr could also be a place to offer your freelancing service as well. These are popular and trustworthy platforms where talented individuals from all over the world can perform a job or an aspect of a job remotely. While I haven't worked on these platforms myself, I've definitely hired talented individuals for my needs. Initially, you might consider a discounted rate in order to build your rating and clientele. But imagine if you have a steady source of income from here, you can work virtually, anywhere in the world. In conclusion, I found these side hustles have not only been financially rewarding, but have been very fulfilling journey because I've learned so much more new things that I would have learned as an employee. I think this alone is worth the pursuit for me. If this is something that you're interested in, definitely leave a thought below. If you have any questions, I'd love to help you out as this is a topic that I'm fairly passionate about.